Facebook famously determined that if a new member invited 10 friends within 14 days, they were hooked for life. So they focused religiously on driving the user experience to this key metric. If you apply this product-based approach to B2B sales, then you can identify those users that are ready to talk. And this method is known as the Product Qualified Lead, or PQL. So if you sell in a freemium, open source, or trial model, then the PQL method is critical to give your sales team visibility into who is ready to talk. So talk to your data team, or better yet, partner with Whaler's team of data scientists to develop a PQL model tailored specifically for your business. You'll be empowered by knowing exactly when a user is ready to convert. To see specific examples, go to getwhaler.com/Andy. That's GETWHALR.com/Andy. And as a bonus, if you sign up to learn more about Whaler and PQLs, then Whaler will send you their optimized 2-page master services contract that you can leverage for your own business free of charge. It's time to accelerate. Hi, this is Andy. Welcome to another edition of Frontline Friday with my regular and very special guest, Bridget Gleason. Now, before we get to the show, Bridget and I have a favor to ask of you. We'd really appreciate it if you took time right now to leave a review for this show on iTunes. And while you're there, click the button, subscribe to Accelerate. Make sure you get Frontline Friday automatically each week. Also, we need to hear from you. More specifically, we need your sales questions. What can we answer for you? What challenges do you have that we can help you with? So go to accelerate.fm/frontline and enter your question there. Each month, we're going to select one listener's question to be the question of the month. And the winner will receive a $50 Amazon gift card. So remember, go to accelerate.fm/frontline to give us your question and maybe win $50. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Frontline Fridays, part of the Accelerate podcast with my very special guest, Bridget Gleason. And we actually have another special guest with us today.
Special, or just special?
Well, first-time visitor, so I don't think he gets two specials, but we can certainly give him a special. But maybe before we bring him on, let's just, the obligatory question: how you doing?
You know the answer. Fantastic, wonderful. I just got back from a great reunion with my family, so feeling very recharged and just great to see family and spend time with people I really care about. So feeling great.
So does that mean that Thanksgiving dinners are always Thanksgiving dinners are always uplifting because you'd go against many decades of tradition. Just family reunions are supposed to bring you down.
I know. And you know what? They don't. And maybe it's because we get together. It sounds sad, but it's the anniversary of my father's death. And he died 27 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we've got together every year since then. And it's just become this great time for all of us to be together, not pressure around who's cooking what and what does it need to look like. And we always go to a different place. And I think it's just a time for all of us. We feel a lot of gratitude that we had this great dad, this great role model in our lives, and we're super close. So we definitely have our issues. Let me be clear. I mean, the family reunions, there's always a bit of drama, but I think generally speaking, it's just been a really great time for all of us. So that sort of carries over into the week.
Yeah, and your dad is probably wherever he is thinking, they waited till I died to start these parties.
No, if you knew my dad, you would know. No. He was right there in it with us. He would be really happy that we're carrying on this tradition.
All right. Perfect. Okay. Well, speaking of parties of a sort, we've got a third party that's joining us for our broadcast today, which was something we've been doing a little more frequently. And so I'm going to let you introduce him.
Wonderful. Well, I am so thrilled to introduce Josh Phillips, and I have the privilege of working with Josh at Logs.io. He heads up our account management team, and he's based out of Tel Aviv. And just has been a really, really valuable part of the team, certainly since I've joined, and really helpful for me. So excited, Josh, to have you on the show.
Hi, guys. I am super excited. So I'm going to go on up already. This is the first time I've ever been on a podcast. So I got a big grin on my face right now.
Well, that's good. That's good. We're glad that we're able to be a source of excitement for you. So, well, Josh, welcome. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
And thank you for, staying up late. What time is it right now in Tel Aviv?
Oh, it's 8:20.
Okay, not
so
too bad.
Actually.
Not too bad. Okay. All right. Well, good. Well, so Josh, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we'll talk about the topics we're going to get in.
So I work for Logs.io, and as Bridget said, I head up the account management. That means for our customers, I'm in the front line. I'm there for them, whether they need something technical, whether they have something regards to training on the product, or whether there's just normal business interactions where our company needs a face for our customers. I'm that guy.
Okay. And so is this the first job you did with Logs.io, or were you doing other jobs beforehand?
Funnily enough, this is actually the second job I've had here. When I first came here, I worked with the sales development team. So it's really interesting flip between starting at the company and speaking to customers who have never heard of us. And we're a pretty young company. So it can even just be how to pronounce the name of the company, and then flipping over in the middle and going to speak to people who have been using the product and loving it and getting into it. You get to hear some very different stories on both sides, and occasionally you get to speak to the same people on either side of their journey to becoming really happy customers.
Good. Yeah, to expect if you'd worked as a sales development role that hopefully you would be dealing with some of your customers. So, one of the things we wanted to talk about, and this has been a topic that Bridget and I have explored on the show, is the young sort of new generation of people coming into sales. I guess, and sort of how they're different perhaps than preceding generations. And I guess one of the questions I had is why are young people choosing to go into sales these days?
It's an interesting question. There's a really cool book out there called Everyone Can Sell by Daniel Pink. And he writes some really good guidebooks. And he talks about how nearly everyone's in sales now. I think it's something that draws people because it allows you to focus in an industry that you're interested in. But there's a lot of people skills that go into sales. And I think my generation is very much used to being set short-term targets and goals. Sales really speaks to that. I took so many exams growing up. I was so used to these sprints, these moments where you have to get there and go for it. I think sales reproduces a lot of that experience.
Where'd you grow up?
So you might have noticed, even though I'm in our Tel Aviv office, I don't have the strongest Middle Eastern accent. I'm actually from Manchester in the UK.
So, Red Devil fan or Blues fan?
I'm a big Manchester United fan, and thank you for calling them the Red Devils.
I knew this would come up.
Awesome.
So
now I'm happy.
You must be excited about the whole Lukaku transfer.
I'm thrilled. I'm really happy. We needed a big, strong target man, and I think Zlatan's gone. We brought him with a proven scoring record. I think it's like 20 plus goals, 3 seasons straight.
Yep.
That's what you need. It's like being a striker in football is just like being a sales guy. You're the pointy end of the stick, and nothing is better than consistency.
Wow. That's Bridget, we've talked soccer a little bit, but that's sort of the first time we've drawn an analogy to sales.
Do you know why?
Because you don't care.
And I don't play soccer. Right. So, of course, I have no analogies to draw. I have nothing to add. And so, you know what I do? I end the conversation. We digress. That's why.
Huh.
Okay. I know it's strange. I only want to talk about what I want to talk about. Okay. I have a question for you, Josh, Andy.
Oh, for me or for Josh?
I'm going to direct it at Josh, and you can also offer your opinion, Andy, after.
Okay, thank you.
As you can see, Josh is not a surprise. I can be bossy periodically. Andy laughs because he knows that too. So there are these stereotypes of millennials, and there's all kinds of them. And I'd love to get your perspective. Number one, you are a millennial. You've managed millennials, and these are your people. So one of them is the sense of entitlement, and kind of a sense of entitlement, and also feeling like they deserve a trophy just for doing their job. How would you respond to that? Do you think that's true? Do you think that's accurate? I would just love to get your reaction to that.
I actually do think it's true, but I don't think it's for the reasons people think. And I think it speaks to the changes in our educational cultures. I said a few minutes ago, in my experience growing up, we would have not just like pop quizzes, but tests and exams that you would have to work for that would go towards final grades. And you get used to this process of constantly being given incremental targets, and you have to hit them, and you have to hit them. And so you get used to this. It's just kind of like a Pavlovian response, action, reward, action, reward. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think it's a very different working culture to people from previous generations. Like the baby boomer generation, I don't think was brought up with quite that give and take back and forth. And so you end up with a breakdown where people have different ways of working. You don't always understand why they're working in different ways. Does that make sense?
No.
So let me.
No.
Could you be more clear about that, Bridget?
No. I know. I don't know how that relates to this I don't know how the short sprints relates to a stereotype of being entitled or getting a trophy just for showing up. Getting it.
So the question I have, Bridget, do you think they're true? The stereotypes?
No, I don't. I haven't. That hasn't been my experience. But I don't know if it's because it's a selective pool that I'm hiring, because I hear this a lot.
But Josh wanted to want us to give him a trophy for coming on the show.
I know, exactly. Well, unfortunately, he's not going to get one. But no, and I guess I would say also just Josh being as an example. God, I mean, one of the things I love about working with Josh is here's a guy that actually I never feel like I don't ever get this sense of entitlement from him ever. Like Josh does. If I needed somebody to clean a window and that would help, I am very confident that if it was going to help the customer, Josh would be the first one out there with a Windex and a paper towel, cleaning it. So I don't sense that, but I guess so. I'm curious about these stereotypes because you read about them all the time, and I guess the reason I said no, Josh White didn't make sense is you feel like that seems true, and you're tying it back to maybe entitlement's not the right word, but they're used to. These sprints where there's some sort of recognition or feedback given frequently.
Very much so. I think it's a misunderstood thing. I think it's true that like baby boomer generation see these behavior patterns and they say to themselves, if I saw these behavior patterns in somebody who's my contemporary, that would clearly be a case of this person displaying, a sense of over-entitlement. But I think the same behavior patterns mean something different from a millennial. When I was, must have been about 7 years ago now, when I was finishing up my master's program, I saw this article. I actually got it on my screen now because it had these 5 tips for people going into the workplace, and they really hit home. There was, if you only do what you're told, you'll excel. These are like lessons that you're taught going through the modern education system, where this is even true in university education and even in advanced degrees. You get taught that if you do what you're told, you'll excel. In the workplace, that's not true. If you only do what you're told, you'll be average. You won't be anything more than that. You've got to do what others are willing to do and do it better. And then you've got to do what they're not willing to do. And it's a real headspace change from just thinking that, here's your crib sheet, learn this, do this. The professor's told you the answers, and you'll get a pat on the back. A lot of people in my generation, they don't understand why they're being micromanaged, because they're always being congratulated on crossing the next boundary. When they hit the workplace and they start being micromanaged because they've not earned the confidence of their manager, they're really surprised. Well, why is this person telling me what to do all the time? And then the manager goes, wow, this guy thinks I'm just going to let him fly free when I've not had a chance to make sure he's good for the job. Neither of them are wrong, but they're working at completely cross purposes. There's like a whole bunch of others, but I think the first two are good illustrations.
Yeah, I think this whole idea of entitlement is sort of a misinterpretation of sort of either by boomers or Gen Xers of the millennials, because one of the things that seems to be the hallmark of a millennial generation is this idea is, well, why do things have to be this way, right? and that's interpreted as a sense of entitlement, as opposed to, maybe there's a better way to get this accomplished. And they're not content to serve their time as we did sort of when we were younger. I mean, I was fortunate enough to get promoted quickly into my first management job and get on that track. But, a lot of companies, you were looking at, just coming and do your time for 5 or 6 years until, someone would think, hey, it's your time, we'll promote you. So, they believe in a meritocracy more so than I think that, preceding generations did. And, I think that's part of what people sort of interpret as entitlement. It's really just impatience to some degree, but impatience and oftentimes motivated by the right things. I mean, I think this whole idea of the participation trophies and so on, my kids are millennials, and the first thing they did with the participation trophies were throw them away because they meant nothing to them. Because they were of the type, maybe it's just them, but I'm sure that a lot of their friends shared the same thing. It's like, well, the parents wanted to give this, so it doesn't mean anything. Sort of like the games when the kids were young playing soccer, and the parents all went around saying, we're not keeping score. And I'm saying, but the kids all know what the score is. And even when they were 6 years old, they all knew to a goal exactly what the score was, right? So, a lot of this, I think, is the parents, not the kids.
Mm-hmm. Please, Bridget.
Well, I was just going to say I hadn't heard it described that way, Andy, but I do think it makes a lot of sense. The entitlement versus a meritocracy. And God, we're dating ourselves, but sorry, Josh, Andy and I are like,
I'm a millennial. What are you talking about?
Okay. So we're early on, and our set,
you may be old, but not me.
I know the way that it was more, you do your time and you do the job, and promotions come, but you've got to have a certain amount of time in the seat. And that was just the expectation. That's how it worked. And I think you're right that there is much more of this meritocracy. So, like I said, I don't necessarily see these characteristics as being entitled. But when you say, do they millennials believe more in a meritocracy? 100%. I see that in spades. And maybe it's just putting a different label or a different way to look at this impatience, perhaps, that they have, that is not necessarily a bad thing. If I can do the job and I can do it faster and I can do it better, I want to be able to go and get that raise or that position or that job.
Or at least be heard.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the struggle I see that so many boomers have in managing millennials is just, it's like, who are these people that think they should have a voice? And it's like, why shouldn't they, right? They've got a good idea. Who cares where it comes from?
Right.
I think technology increases transparency, and transparency is very helpful towards people who pursue a meritocratic workplace. Meaning, if you have people like myself, where in my entire career in sales, I've had access to every company report you could possibly want to pull from a unified CRM. There's no hiding behind, everyone's ability to see everyone else's work and output, contribution. There's no obfuscation where you're saying, well, okay, so this guy's on this level. I can't see this data. That meritocratic aspect falls away. The more you see, the more you desire to compare people on a level playing field.
Yeah, well, I think at sales, while there weren't always CRM systems, I'm going to talk to ask Bridget about this, but every place I worked, there was always a sales board.
Oh, yes. And some of them were just like they would do it by hand. But every day, I remember at Xerox, every day, there were maybe 30 or 40 of us. There were a lot. And every day, you'd walk in and it would be updated. Who was at the top all the way to who was at the bottom. So we didn't have as much visibility as we have today, but there was always this ranking. And maybe it goes back to, Josh, what you were saying earlier about how millennials are drawn to sales because there is this immediate feedback. Where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Am I number 1? Am I number 5? Am I number 30?
It definitely plays into the headspace. And I also, sales has kind of, sales is one of those things where a lot of people move through it and people will jump between sales jobs. And the sort of job security that you guys are talking about, 5 or 6 years, like to sit in a seat. I know very few people. I'm 33, by the way. So, some of my colleagues have been in the workplace now for a considerable period of time, 15 years. I know very few people who have done 6 years at the same company. There just doesn't seem to be that sort of staying power, both with employees and employers. And so, sales kind of complements that rapidity in the workplace.
Well, I think it's sort of, what I was referring to, I think Bridget as well, is when you're doing your time is to get promoted, you had to be making your numbers that whole time. I mean, to stick around, you were going to be gone if you weren't making your numbers pretty quickly. Companies were very ruthless back when we started, and I'll talk what I did. It's not that long ago, but is that they had overhire intentionally, and with the goal that they were going to they're looking for nuggets of gold, and the rest are going to go pretty darn quickly. And so, like in my case, to get to our first sizable training class in selling computer systems, we had to go out really even before we were trained and sell X amount of gear before we could even qualify to go to training. And if you didn't make that generally within a few months, you're gone. So we had the first bar within, let's say, at the latest 6 months of being hired. You had to hit a certain milestone. If you didn't hit that milestone, you were just gone because you couldn't. They weren't going to send you to training. And then you got back in the first training, and before you go to the second training, pretty much that same thing. So, they were pretty ruthless about flushing out the people that just weren't going to be keepers.
Yeah, and it wasn't job security like you might think about it, Josh. It was, don't think about getting promoted. You've got to survive and do well in that, let's say, 5 years. But don't think about getting promoted in that time. You've got to be hitting your numbers. You've got to be at 100%. You've got to be doing well, and you're not going to get promoted. So I think that's one of the differences. It wasn't necessarily a sense of, okay, I've got some job security here at all. It was, don't think about getting promoted until you've done that time and you've done well.
Yeah, it wasn't quite as bad as waiting for people to die, but in a couple instances, almost felt like that.
Yeah. Not quite that bad, but felt like it.
Well, compared to going into sales today, when I started, in the office I started in, there was one guy in his 60s. There were maybe two guys in their 40s. I'm coming in at 21. and a number of people in their 30s. I mean, it was completely different, sort of like different than going into a SaaS startup where everybody's in their 20s. Yeah, it's real age ranges. Yeah, one guy's working with it. Yeah, when I started, he'd fought in World War II.
Wow.
Okay, Andy. I think we've got to really stop the aging references because as time goes on, people are going to...
old. He was old. I was young. He was old.
Okay, all right. All right, but you still worked alongside of him.
Not for long.
Okay, so there's some overlap there.
Not for long. And this was a guy who we were selling computers that struggled mightily because he had been hugely successful back when computers were basically sort of these electromechanical devices. And as it moved into a pure digital realm, he was just lost. I mean, within 6 months of me joining, he was gone just because he just couldn't cope with the pace of change.
So I have an interesting anecdote. I told this to Bridget last week when we were just talking about coming on this podcast, and I really like it because I don't know, I think it highlights this. Because I worked in my first job selling tech. There was a decent age range of people, somewhere between like 25 to 40. And people would say to us when we would speak to them, it was one of those products that has loads of different modules. Mm-hmm. But, it was a SaaS product. You'd speak to people on the phone and they'd really be concerned. They talk about out-of-the-box functionality. And, we would, this is out of the box, that's out of the box. And after a few years of doing this, I remember turning around to a colleague and I said, I think I understand why they talk about this, whether or not this module is included as being out of the box. And the guy said to me, well, why? And I said, because I'm pretty sure when they started procuring software, they had to order the disks, which would then be posted to them in the mail. Mm-hmm. And if it arrived in the mail and the installation disk wasn't there for the module they wanted, it wasn't out of the box. Now they wouldn't have what they wanted to do. And in my entire time doing this, out of the box means, do you want me to go into the back end and change the configuration? I've never sent anyone a box of software before.
Well, I hate to tell you, but it predates even your example. So it's really just about selling a piece of hardware, not just even software, right? So
it's one step. One step before that.
Yeah. So, well, I guess the question I'd have for you, Josh, is, and this may take us sort of to the end of our time, is so as you look forward and you and your colleagues look forward and say, okay, let's look 3 to 5 years out. What's going to be different for us then? I mean, what are we going to have to do to prepare ourselves? Because, we've got AI coming on stream really quickly, machine learning, predictive analytics. We've got intelligent bots or AI-driven bots that, are starting to eat into the lower end of the SDR functionality. I mean, so as somebody in sales, what are you saying? I was like, shoot, here's something I really need to master if I really want to be, have a long sales career.
You know what's funny? I actually think that the more of these things come in, they're distractions. The person buys you, and I've spoken to Bridget about this as well sometimes. The relationship is still so central. I remember I had another manager who'd always say they buy you before they buy the product. A lot of this stuff, I actually think it's kind of noise, right? There's always something new out there. There's always another tool or technology. If you forget that you're selling something to a person, you're selling the dream of them getting a pat on the back for a job well done and benefits for their business, which are really tangible, then you're going to fail. And if I kind of feel like all of this stuff can end up distracting people from what really counts.
Well, I think so. But I mean, one of the things that we hear oftentimes these days, and certainly hear from buyers, is that, we've got a generation in sales that's easily distracted by technology and other things. And that one of the things that's really suffering is this ability to connect and engage with the other person. In fact, you look at a lot of the technology we use to reach out to prospects is sort of thinly personalized, not very human communications, as I call it. And that sort of, flows sometimes into sort of the interpersonal part of it. So I understand. I mean, I think your answer is the absolute right answer, but to me, the bigger concern is, how do we get more people to sort of understand that?
I don't know. That's a golden question. I mean, it's so easy to think that you can just walk on in there and just, spout lots of knowledge and think that's going to close a deal. A few times Bridget said to me, don't have happy ears. Don't let your own assumptions about what's going on take over. And that process of listening, I mean, it's kind of what you said, back in the day, people would still only get a certain amount of time before they're either selling or they're failing. I don't think you can fake this stuff. Either you can listen to people and communicate with them and build that connection and use that to drive a sale, or you can't. Teaching it, I think you got to listen to people who have danced the dance before and not get too concerned with what your own conceptions are. Remember that there are other people who know more than you.
Like Bridget. Happy ears, Bridget. You hadn't used that with me before. You've been holding back.
I like to hold back. I mean, I know we've done 95 of these, but I have to save something for 96, 97, 98. If I told everything like in the first 95, you'd get somebody else.
All right.
This is job security, Andy.
Okay.
I can't tell you everything right off the bat.
You got me on that one.
Just imagine what's going to come between 100 and 200. I've got lots more stuff.
That's going to be hard to top happy ears. So, I think it's a great point, Josh. And I think that is the central challenge is that people tend to look at technology and think that it's going to replace sales in certain dimensions, which it may in certain areas, but in the main, what the technology is, you call it a distraction. I think more than a distraction, it's a spur to understand that if you want to have a successful career in sales, you actually have to become more human in the way you interact with people, and not less. And being more human is a challenge.
It can be. I meet so few of my customers. They live all over the world. They barely will see a photograph of me. Sometimes remembering just to look up their LinkedIn profile or their social profile and give them a context in their career journey or their hobbies, that can be the difference. It's so easy just to get used to sending emails and doing WebExes and you're just flying on your own, and you can. It's easy to lose track of that human element.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Bridget, any last questions before we have to sign off?
My only question, Josh, do you use Skype or WebEx with video a lot, and do you think that that's helpful? Since, as you said, I know you've got customers all over the world. Do you tend to use that so that there is that face-to-face, and do you find that helps?
I try. I don't always use the video portion because I'm aware that it makes people uncomfortable. So usually I'll start video calls with the video part off. If they put it on, I'll turn it on with them. But often they prefer not to look at me. I don't know whether that's a reflection.
Don't take that personally, Josh. Don't take that personally.
I try not. My wife tells me it's only part of the reason they don't want to.
Okay, good. Someone needs to be honest with you.
But actually, funnily, some of them don't even want to do a call. A lot of them just prefer chat and email. They're too busy to take time out for me, and so I got to try and grab their attention any way I can.
All right. Well, good. Well, Josh, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll make sure to have you back on the show again.
I would love that. Thank you for having me.
Hopefully
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, hopefully your first experience on a podcast was positive.
I'm not crying yet, so this is a good start.
All right.
Okay, good.
Come back the next time. We'll work on you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, good luck to Man U this year.
Yes.
I have to admit, I'm a Liverpool guy, so,
Ooh, I'm glad you waited until the end to tell me that. That would have changed the complexion of the whole conversation.
Exactly.
Nope.
Exactly. He probably knew that.
I knew that, yeah. But as I remember, one of those two teams is playing Champions League this year and one isn't. So anyway, yeah. So here we go. Actually, Man U is playing, aren't they? Because they won the Europa League. That's right. They snuck in the back door. Okay. They weren't good.
It works for me.
They weren't good enough to qualify the regular way, but they did get in, yes. Okay. All right, Bridget, as always.
Wonderful.
Great to talk with you.
Great.
And
likewise.
friends, thank you for spending this time with us today. Make sure you come back again next week. Listen to another episode of Frontline Fridays. Of course, every day during the week, you can listen to another episode of Accelerate, just as Josh does, to keep current on sales things. So thanks for joining us. Till next time.
All right. Have a great one.